around a little bit, get some energy flowing, whether you're at home or in the room. We usually have soul connection to do that, and so in this time of pandemic, we just need to create that energy ourselves. So dig deep, deep breath. Be ready to have your socks rocked. Today, our spiritual leader, our senior minister, Reverend Tim, will be speaking on a topic that he didn't change this week. So it's called A Question of Faith. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Tim Peterson.
Thank you. I don't change my talk titles every week. But I change my talks every week. In fact, I changed my talk at 9 o'clock last night from what I was going to talk about. We talked about classes there. Reverend Catherine talked about classes, and I had a different experience when I first took classes, as I didn't like them because I argued them. And everybody came up and told me that I should read this, I should do this, I should do that. And I was a bit of a rebel. Now, the problem with being a rebel is I rebelled against everything. It wasn't just the old stuff, it was the new stuff I was learning too. I kept asking questions about why. And nobody could give me an answer that satisfied me. When I first got into this teaching, I heard things like spiritual prototypes that I had no idea what they were talking about. I heard word consciousness over and over and over again. I heard that thoughts are things, and it didn't make sense to me because I hadn't come from that place. I came from a different place. Now when I teach class, and now when I go to new classes, I've changed. I've opened my mind a little bit to create something new, to expand my consciousness into a new thought or a new idea of what possibilities could be. When I first got into this teaching, they talked about manifestation. And manifesting, they literally manifesting something out of nothing. Thoughts create. Now, quantum physics tells us that there's only one thing. There's only energy, and we create things from energy. And the things go back to energy once they leave. It amazed me. Everything comes from an apparent nothing. And I didn't want to believe this. It went against everything that I'd been taught and everything that I had possibly imagined. Now, I said it went against everything that I taught, but it didn't go against everything I believed. Because I never believed a lot of the stuff that I was taught growing up. And I kept asking questions about why. Why do you say this? And I was brought up in a very strict religious upbringing. And it was an upbringing where you really didn't question, except me. Emma Curtis Hopkins told us to hold the high watch, to raise our vision of the possibilities. And from where I was in my old place, I didn't have that raised vision because nobody could satisfy my need of an answer. Nobody could give me an answer. New thought is now part of my spiritual evolution. It is honoring something that might be new that I hadn't thought of before. I've been doing a lot of interesting study about Ernest Holmes in the last couple of weeks because I'm doing a class on it. And Ernest Holmes said, if you're teaching the same thing that I'm teaching 50 years from now, you're not doing it right. You're doing it wrong. New thoughts and questions are part of our spiritual evolution. And they need to be. New thought really means to question those old beliefs that we may have inherited but never really believed. And I questioned almost everything that I heard. And I think I upset some of my teachers because, I can remember them saying something and they would refuse to look at me because they'd see with my hand is up and I was ready to ask the question about why. Why would you say that? And they really didn't want to answer me, and I don't think they understood. I don't think they understood what they were talking about in a lot of cases. I think what they had come to an idea of what faith is to them. So the question of faith is to them different than it was to me. Because I wanted answers. When I would ask them difficult questions and they didn't really want to answer me, the one thing that they would come back to me is, well, just you got to have faith. And I don't have to just have faith. I want something more. I want something, a greater idea. So explain something to me how this whole thing works. And this teaching was the one that came closest to teaching me how life works. And I fought it every step of the way. My wife was taking classes. She was the first one who got into this. She pulls me into a lot of stuff. I took classes because at first I wanted to save her because I know she was going to get pulled into this. And then I wanted to make somebody wrong. The initial idea of me taking classes was to make somebody else wrong instead of learning what I could learn. So I didn't learn much my first year of taking classes. It wasn't until I really started to understand this teaching a little bit more that it's not just a head teaching, it's a heart teaching. It's how we feel that changes our lives. It moves us to create something new, something expansive, something visionary. I love having that idea of a spiritual prototype right now. So I can envision something and it can manifest itself through my vision and through my co-creation with Spirit to manifest something new in my life. When the oil thing happened in about 1984, I guess, there was a downturn in the oil industry, and I lost my job in Nisku. I was part of that community out there. And I didn't know what to do, except I had this idea that I needed to move down to Red Deer. And I needed to start up a business out there that had never been there. And it was a business that nobody said that would work. They said we're too close to Edmonton and too close to Calgary to bring this idea into Red Deer. And I just couldn't let it go. It just was needed me to be down there. So I talked to a partner and we started a business. And the first day that the business opened, I got 2 calls. And this was after even business hours. And it was 10 minutes. Bang, bang. For $20,000 worth of business. And I just thought, man, this is going to be easy. Well, it wasn't. But those first minutes was a thing that said, you're on the right track. They do need you down here. But it takes work after I got there. It takes work for me to go and make myself known. And that's, I think, what stops us and stops this new thought idea from manifesting to a greater degree is our ability to make ourselves known. To be out there, to say what we truly believe without any fear of any repercussions. To honor that which we've been taught. And to co-create with Spirit a new idea of what the possibilities could be. When people would tell me what they knew, it really didn't satisfy me because I wanted to know what I wanted to know. And I wanted to know it. I didn't want somebody else's idea coming in and saying, now this is mine. I wanted to have a deeper understanding. I want to know and know I know. I can still remember my spiritual teachers, and even in this teaching, saying something to me and my hand would still go up, arguing. And I would argue for my limitation. I kept wondering, why is nobody giving me answers? And I finally realized, it finally clued in that nobody can give me answers. It has to come from within. It has to be a known truth to me. It has to be an act of faith, but a deeper act of faith. Not somebody else's faith that I'm going to borrow for a while, but it's something that's deep and abiding within me. I was relying on somebody else's answers to become my own answers instead of getting my own. So faith and I didn't get along too well for many years until I made the idea of faith relative to me. We come into this world believing because we're taught to believe certain things, and certain things that are the only reality. We have heard people say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And I remember Dr. Wayne Dyer saying, you will see it when you believe it. And that just changed my life. A simple way, a simple change of 2 words, and it changed my life. I can remember on a highway in the middle of going up north to high level, I heard this on a tape. And I had to get out. I stopped the truck right in the middle of the road. Well, I pulled over. But I got out, and it was about 40 below, and I kept walking around my truck going, yes, 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 that's the answer. That's what I've been missing. That's what I haven't been willing to see. You have to have the vision of it before you'll let it into your life. Once I got the idea that my faith was my faith, I began to open ideas about books, about movies, about songs, about seeing new things. And understanding at a deeper level. There's a saying, when deep calls to deep, deep answers. But it only answers when we can get to that point of really understanding, of really delving into that belief that we may have had or not have, to a belief that we do have. Something that honors us. Shakespeare said, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt in your philosophy. Jim Morrison wrote, there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors. Now back then, Shakespeare was cool. But Jim Morrison spoke to me. There are things known and things unknown. And in between, there are the doors. I wondered when I read that how many doors I would have to answer or open to get my answer. And the answer came, as many as I've created. Because I was the one that created the doors. I was the one that stopped something from coming in. I put my hands up or I closed the door to it. And in some cases, I build walls up. Not wanting to hear something or not wanting to really understand. Not wanting to take responsibility for my life. Because my life at one point wasn't going too well. And I really wanted to blame somebody else for it. Until I didn't. Until I chose to create a new life from what I had right now. And the friends that I had when I started to create this new life, when I wanted to create this new life, didn't support me in that. They said, why would you do anything else? I mean, your life's going pretty good. They had no idea what I was feeling. They had no idea what I was thinking. But I went along. I got along. But there was always something missing, and that something missing was heart. That something missing was actually having faith in what I knew to be true. I've seen acts of faith happen in my life that have shocked me. A young fellow I know had HIV/AIDS, and he was down in the Calgary hospital. And he was called, or his parents were called the one night. They said, you better come down here because he's not going to make it through the night. And so they went down there, and the minister our minister in Red Deer at the time went down there with him. And he spent about an hour with this young man, and he asked him, do you want to live or die? And the guy said, I want to live. And he said, well, let's pick a date when you want to get out of here then. So they got a calendar, and they picked a date, and he circled the date, 6 weeks from this day. And before 6 weeks had gone, this young man was at home again. And he was putting on weight, and he was living his life, and he was happy. So he had a new idea of what the possibilities could be. Instead of having that death sentence, he had a life sentence. And I'll remember that this well-intentioned person that he was seeing said to him that the government will give you a death benefit if you've got HIV/AIDS. But you've got to apply for it. So he applied for this money, and he got this money. But he also made a declaration that he had this disease. And it wasn't 3 months later that he passed. So it's what you're putting your energy on that really makes a difference. I went and saw this young girl in Red Deer, and I couldn't recognize her. She was down to skin and bones, lying in the bed in the hospital. And I used what Reverend Doug did in Calgary. I said, do you want to live? Do you want to live or die? And she said, what do you mean live? Everybody around here is telling me that I'm dying. I said, do you want to die or do you want to live? And she says, I want to live. And I said, how do you want to live? And she said, I want to live like I used to live. Like I used to be. I can remember seeing her, and I had to close my eyes. I had to do some treatment work for myself because I couldn't get that vision of her out of my mind. That vision of this young girl that was just skin and bone. She looked like death. So I treated and I treated and I treated and I treated until I could have a picture of her as I know her to be true. That whole perfect, complete idea of what perfection looks like. So I did treatment work, and I left the hospital knowing that I did the right thing. And it was about 6 months later, I was at a Sillamar at a minister's conference. And I heard somebody yelling, Reverend Tim, Reverend Tim, Reverend Tim! And I saw this young girl running up to me, and I didn't recognize her. It was this one that I did treatment work for, and she was beautiful. She had gained all the weight that they said that she had lost. It was like a miracle happened. But I know it wasn't a miracle. It was through the law. Through our concept of what our life could be. So when somebody asks you, what do you want your life to be like? What do you say to them? You say, I want it to be magnificent. I want it to be like it used to be. I want it to be brilliant. Or do you want to just get by? Because so many times people just want to get by. Just let me get through this day and let's start the next day. And if we're going to do that, then we're going to do that the next day and the next day and the next day. We've got to have a plan. We've got to have a bigger idea. I've got a deep and abiding faith in many things. And one of the things that I've got a deep and abiding faith in is the power to heal. And I've heard it over and over and over again, how people have had these miraculous changes in their life. And I had to understand that it wasn't a miracle. I had to understand that these things are possible. And not only possible, probable if we just put our mind to it, or put that consciousness that we have to it. But it's got to be steady. It's got to be unwavering. Because once we waver in something, we have lost everything that we brought up to that point. Some of the times in my business life that I wavered. And it wasn't a pretty sight. Some days it was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And then I started ministry. That'll be easy. Let's move to a place that I've never been before. We'll move to Winnipeg. Why Winnipeg? Well, why not? Because somebody said, why don't you move to Winnipeg and start a church? What a great idea. And it was the greatest idea I've ever had. And it was also the hardest idea I've ever had. When I went out there, it was with the intention and was with the knowledge that Winnipeg needs you out there. And when I was a young minister, I said, Winnipeg needs me out there to teach this. So I went out there and I started this church. And I got the business cards and I got the place and I got everything going. And the first week I had 5 people. 3 of them came from Red Deer to support me. The next week I had 2. 3 with me. 4 with my wife. I wondered in that moment, what did I get into? And then I thought, it's been 2 weeks. It's only been 2 weeks. Give yourself a break. So I started to call everybody that would signed up for Creative Thought or Science Mind magazine and said that we're in Winnipeg now. Come out and join us. Slowly, little by little, our center started to grow. We moved out of that hotel room into a different hotel room, a bigger hotel room, and then out of that hotel room into our own little place, and out of our own little place into a bigger place. And finally, we ended up splitting a beautiful church with the United Church. It was quite a magnificent display of consciousness. But it wasn't always easy. And there were times when I couldn't see how I was going to get through it. And the only way that I got through it was to phone somebody who knew a greater idea than I did. I remember talking to one minister, and she was brilliant in what she said to me. She said, are you sure you want to do this ministry stuff? And I said, yeah, I can't do anything else. And he said, then you better get busy. You better start doing what you do best. She said, have you been doing your spiritual practice? And I said, well, no, I kind of let that go. And that's what happens when stuff happens. We seem to let go of that spiritual practice, thinking that this either doesn't work or, God, I'm just too tired. Spiritual practice is the most important thing in my life. It is the thing that starts me during the day to create the life that I want. It gives me that vision of what I want this day to become. It gives me a vision of what I want this talk to be like. What I want to express, what I want to say to people, what I want them to hear. Because it's not really what I say, it's what I want them to hear, what really understand, is how powerful this teaching is. Because once we understand how powerful this teaching is, and once we understand that we can use this teaching, then we become that powerful. We can change lives and we can change our life. Starting this Center for Spiritual Living Edmonton-Metro, was the best idea I've ever had in my life. And it was a struggle. But I'll tell you, it's worth it. If you're doing what honors you, if you're speaking your truth from a point of absolute clarity, then you can't go wrong. There's only one power in the universe, and we direct it. It's ours to direct. Faith is an investment. We all have the same amount of faith Each one of us is faithful, but it depends on what we are faithful to. That depends on how life will be. If we're faithful to the idea that I can't do this, you get to be right. If you're faithful to an idea that you can, you get to be right. And since like attracts like, that which we're faithful to brings more to us through the law of attraction. Do you have faith in yourself? And yes, you do. You have faith in yourself one way or the other. The more important question is, how is that faith invested? How are you living that faith? Faith is easy, as long as things are going great. Jesus wasn't the only one who walked on water. Peter did too, but he had Jesus with him, knowing a greater truth. And once Peter left, or Jesus took his hand away, and Peter was on himself, by himself, he couldn't no longer stay up. We have the ability not just to walk on water, not to walk on water, but to create the life that we want. Because it's really done unto you as you believe. Faith is a belief in something unseen but known. When I heard this teaching, when I first heard this teaching, I wouldn't accept it, but I knew it was true for me. It honored who I was. And all I had to do was honor what it was, what it taught. So look at your acts of faith this week. Keep track of them. Make a list. Get a clear idea. Are they coming from that deep inner knowing of who you really are? Are they coming from that God center within each of us? This week, step out and be known. Stand firm in what you know to be true. Speak your truth. No matter the consequences. Because if we speak the truth, the consequences always come back to us with an amazing result. Stop hiding behind past glories or past defeats. Be your true self. Go beyond what you thought you could do. Create the life that you always wanted. There is one power, and that power is love. That power is my power right now. So it is.